Hey everybody, Mo Bunnell here, your host of Real Relationships, Real Revenue. Wow, I just finished a fantastic book. And you know what's sort of cool, audience, is we have the author right here. Can you believe it? I bet you couldn't have expected that or not. So we've got Micheal Melcher. He wrote a fantastic book that I know you're going to love because it's just right down the strike zone of everything that you want to do as a high-end professional, as an expert, as an advisor to your clients. And it's called Your Invisible Network: How to Create, Maintain, and Leverage the Relationships That Will Transform Your Career. Micheal, love this book. The little secret thing that the audience knows is that I judge a book by
I love that visual. I love the 3D. I mean, that's a well-loved book.
It's a well-loved book. I like to hack a book, audio listeners.
Hack it up.
Yeah, you know that I take notes in the margins and I fold over pages that I have something I want to remember, and I can judge a book by how much it impacted me by how many fold over pages I have. I think Micheal, you're in the 30s. Like that's 99th percentile.
That's pretty amazing. I'm gonna hold myself up against all contenders on that.
Stakes are high. Now you have to deliver.
Yeah, now I have something to lose.
Yeah, you better be good at the relationships on this. All right, so all jokes aside, I think our big idea, tell me if I'm wrong or elaborate on this, but the idea of networking, of relationship skills, these are skills that can be learned. Your thoughts?
It's all learnable. And beyond that, your networks are a form of wealth. So relationships are a form of wealth that's under your control. Once you have it, no one can take it away, and you don't really spend it down. And you can create this even if you start with nothing. And I think that is super important because people start their careers with different types of financial backgrounds, different levels of education. They might be in different geographies. And it's easy to get caught up in the idea that I am forever who I am today, but you're not. And this is something you develop over your career. And you can start it out when you're 23, 24, but you could also be 45, 50 and think, you know what, it's time to get myself in gear. And what can I do to build this going forward? It's all learnable.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Two thoughts. One is we start all of our workshops with research by Dr. Anders Ericsson, basically saying he was the worldwide expert on expertise upon his passing. And he basically said any complex skill is learnable. The other thing your book really made me think back to, I haven't thought of it in a really long time, but when Becky and I moved to Atlanta, we've been married a little over 30 years. I think we had $426 in cash in an envelope. We didn't have jobs. I think we knew 3 people in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And then now I look back and think about this just wonderful community of friends and people that we're cheering on and then cheering us on. And that was all through building relationships. So I loved all your stories in the book because your examples span from everybody that's just getting out of college to somebody late in their career that's a benefactor, if you will. And I just loved that. So go a little deeper on this idea of learnable skill. And then I know we've prepped a lot. We have so many practical concepts we're going to get into, but just go a touch deeper.
Okay. So we're talking about both networking and networks. Networks is a collection of people around you. And I called it your invisible network because you can't quite see it all. There's a horizontal level, which is how you get out of your comfort zone, connect with people that you may not have a lot in common with, who you may even find intimidating, who may not be the kind of person you'd pick as a friend, but are still important, or just meeting new people we'll call weak ties. And you can see some of them, but there are a lot of them right behind that visible level that you can't yet see. And so it's how do we keep pushing into that? And then there's also the vertical level, which is what is a relationship. It's more than a like on Instagram. It's more than a connection on LinkedIn. That's the beginning. But real relationships have reciprocity. They have mutual understanding. They have exchange over time. And you can actually do things to develop them. The other thing I would say about things being learnable, in coaching, we make this distinction between technical and adaptive learning. So technical means there's a known answer. You find the answer, you do it, you try it, here's the model. Adaptive is there may not be a known answer, or you have to get out of your own way. You have to look at some of your underlying assumptions. And so there is this technical part, Here's what you do. Here are some methods. Here are some examples. Here is sort of a model for doing it. But then there's the adaptive part, which is what assumptions do I have? How am I holding myself back? And after I wrote this book, I concluded that it's really a book about discomfort. There is discomfort involved, and it doesn't go away for most people, including for me. But it's what is the meaning of that discomfort? Do you examine it and analyze it and think, oh, I feel weird and uncomfortable. Let me sit in that discomfort forever and figure out what it means. Or do you just think, oh, this probably means I'm growing. And so if I'm doing something that makes me uncomfortable, how about if I give myself a gold star for trying? And by the same token, if you're overly comfortable all the time, it probably means you're not growing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Michael, I love this. And I love both the horizontal and the vertical. And I love the push into new levels. Even that language is good, especially because a lot of people, when they think of networking, they're like, oh, I hate networking. You've probably even seen the study that incorporated lawyers. You have a legal background. That lawyers that were in a networking thing actually felt like they wanted to take a shower afterwards. Like people they just don't like the word.
Yeah.
But if we flip it and we think about what the study actually found was that if you enter a networking event, and I know we're being very narrow here compared with the broad content in the book that we'll get into, but if we enter a networking event, air quotes around that, audio listeners, with the idea of helping, people actually like it. So anyway, let's dig deeper. So one of the things I really liked was your 6 rules of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just teach us about your 6 rules? I thought that was fascinating.
Yes,
I think the audience is going to love it.
I'm going to consult my list to make sure that I am accurately saying. All
yeah.
right. So
well, I haven't put my notes. It's on page 28 of the hard copy.
yes. So read silently as we read along. Okay. So the first one is merit is necessary but not sufficient. And most people would not argue with that. I mean, it would be nice. Well, actually, some people would argue. And I think the more cerebral a job you have, like lawyers, engineers, and so forth, doctors, the more you think like, I will just do a good job and the world will come to me. My merit will be rewarded.
Yes.
I'll just sit back and wait for my A to be delivered. And it just doesn't work that way because relationships are what connect your value to the world, right?
Yes.
It's not quite this glib phrase of it's not what you know, it's who you know, because you really do have to have substance. We live in a really efficient economy. And if you're a bozo or just getting in from someone who knows you, you're just not going to last. You won't.
Yep.
And so necessarily not sufficient. Number 2 is...
By the way, on that note, I love it that you put somewhere in the book, I don't know if it's around this area, but at some point you said you called it like in a really annoying phrase. I think when
super
you
annoying
that it's not what you. I totally agree. You want to have both, and the best expert in the world, if nobody knows them, they can't help anybody. Right. So you gotta have the content and you gotta have the ecosystem of relationships. All right, keep going.
Right. So number 2, the business world is more democratic than you think. So in the US, it is quite common to meet new people, to approach people, to chat them up. It is acceptable. It's even approved of. Now, you won't necessarily be successful in everybody you're reaching out to, reaching back to you, but you're not committing a crime. You're not even committing a faux pas. So, as you may have heard, Prince Harry now sometimes flies commercial. So in the event that I'm sitting next to him on Delta, whatever, I'm going to be classy about it, but I wouldn't hesitate to chat him up. I mean, he's actually knows something about coaching. He was doing some work with Better Up. And so we have like an in. And, I'll kind of choose my moment, but I don't need to be introduced, right? And there are other cultures where you kind of do have to be introduced. And the other thing is that the world of employment is probably the most democratic part of our society. So in the workplace, you are automatically put in contact with people of all different backgrounds. And what they're most interested in is how you do your work, right? So it's an opportunity to connect. And I would further say that business culture around the world is becoming more and more American. So the same characteristic shows up elsewhere. So it's doable.
Yep.
Number
Keep
3,
going. This is great.
How you say things matters. It matters. Chapter, I think it's 10, is called How to Talk About Yourself Without Being Gross. And it makes a difference. There are ways that work and ways that don't. You want to be confident, but no sense of entitlement. You want to be direct, but not too pushy. You want to mix a bit of personal with business. You want to be specific about what you're asking for while still being open to a variety of positive responses. And this is hard. This is hard to master. I mean, there's a reason why we're anxious about it, but there are methods that will work. And this is the part of the book where I have just a lot more technical stuff, like 20, 30, 40 different examples. Okay, here's how you reach out to someone you haven't heard from for a while. Here's how you make a request. Here's how you deal with somebody more senior. And I'll say parenthetically that the coaching world that I work in, it tends to be very question-based. So, hey, Mo, tell me about yourself. Like, what do you want to learn about? How do you regard the situation? What options do you see? That I very much believe in. But when it comes to the communication stuff, people really benefit just for some good examples. Like, oh, okay, got it. I'm going to run with this.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah. And when we do a workshop, we try to have ideas that people 10 years from now can remember, broad themes, but also practical actions they can put together right away, put in place right away. And one of the beautiful things about your book is it has both. And it's in, like, I know some of the audience don't have the book yet. So just what to expect, audience, is there are just dozens and dozens of here is exactly how you write the email kind of examples. And Michael, I thought that was really, really powerful.
Right.
Keep going.
And part of it is that I want the reader to move into action. So it's not read it and then do your homework in 6 months. It's like actually pull out your phone right now and send this message and then see what happens, right? Because that's how you learn, by doing.
Yep.
Number 4, networks become more valuable over time. People tend to become more senior. They remember who you were. Everybody becomes more connected. And in a way, if you just maintain good relationships with your network, you can be dragged along by other people's success. So it's both a short-term thing you're doing, but also a long-term investment.
Yeah. And that was the revelation I had just thinking back 30 years ago plus, is that how different things are now than before. And I have a weekly journaling habit. And one of the little prompts I write is, what am I grateful for each week? And like 80% of the last year's weeks are like, I can't believe how things are getting easier. And I don't know if I feel like it's part of that always adding value, always staying in touch with people. So anyway, just when I read that one, it really struck a chord.
Yeah. And I would also share that when let's say you're just getting started in this work, or you've had a fallow period, or it's not quite your most natural thing, if you stick to it for a bit, you eventually create a positive reinforcement loop.
Yes.
So you might think, oh, it's going to be kind of weird reaching out. And then they say, oh my God, I'm so happy to hear from you. I was just thinking about you, or let's get together, or talk to my friend about this, or here's an article. So it does become easier because you're setting something in motion. You're the one that's activating it, but you're not the only one who's doing stuff. There are other people in the world and they will share in this process.
Yes.
Number 5, probably the most important single point. You must harness the strength of weak ties. All right. Weak ties are people that you don't know very well, either because you just met them, you have a limited connection with them, or maybe you knew them 5, 10 years ago, but the relationship is sort of faded into the distance, as opposed to your strong ties, which are people you have ongoing exchange with, right? So there's a lot of research about it, and basically weak ties are more important than strong ties in many ways. They have different information, there are more of them, they're in some ways easier to access, and they are more open to your changing than your strong ties, who may have a fixed view of what you should do. So I have to say that we are connected through a mutual tie. Stacey Schwartz, I'm not going to say she's a weak tie because I've known her for years and we were very close, but it's possible that, 2 years could go by and we don't talk.
Yep.
But she made that connection happen, right? And because she knew you, she knew me, and she had this idea that the two of us might meet. And so it's a great example of how they function.
Well, and just to give a shout out, I have to pile on the Stacey thing because it was awesome.
Go Stacey!
Everybody loves Stacey. So I think I was on a call with her because we were going to speak at one of their partner retreats and we were preparing for that on the day your book came out. So it was like a Tuesday or whatever. And she's like, I think I asked a broad question. I can't remember for sure. It was like, hey, what are you excited about? As we were sort of wrapping up the call. She's like, oh, I'm super excited because my friend Micheal Melcher, his book comes out today and it's waiting at home from right now. And I can't wait to get home and read it. All that. Wait, I know. And I'm like, well, wait, who's this Micheal Melcher? Like, who is he? And she talked about, the topic of the book, and I just ordered it on Amazon right there. And audience, I think these, like Micheal maybe didn't know it at the time. It might have been a week or two later that she suggested we connect. But audience, think about this. People are talking about you all the time if you have a robust network, if you have some expertise to share. And my guess is that you hear about 1 out of 100 of those.
Mm-hmm.
And so 99 times out of 100, if you build up this network, people are running around trying to help you because you've helped them.
Right.
And these weak ties are that outer ring of people that just gets an order or two magnitude bigger than your close relationships. And it's so important. I couldn't agree more, Michael.
And your example tracks back to number 3, the how you say things, because part of maintaining your network is a kind of ongoing educating of people you know. What's important to you right now? What's up to you right now? People may love you, but not be aware of what your current goals are, right? And so
Yes.
part of it is how do I know that people know what I'm up to right now, and vice versa? Like, do I really know what my colleagues and friends are most interested? Probably not, unless you ask them. And then the 6th rule: make social contagion work for you. I love this idea.
I love that one. Yeah, go deeper.
All right. So Nicholas Christakis, a researcher at Yale, came up with this thing called social contagion. And what that means is that your thoughts, feelings, and actions are not purely your own. It's not totally from personal agency. Instead, what we do and how we think is very much affected by the people in our network, and not just our family, friends, but our friends, or our relatives, or our colleagues. So people you don't actually see and may not know personally, but they have an influence on you. And so research shows that things related to how fast you walk, where you vacation, how many kids you have, do you get vaccinated, do you vote, who do you vote for? These are all very much affected by our networks. And my takeaway from this is that when you think about changing your life in some useful way or setting a goal, you could think about, all right, I'm going to have this goal, or you can think about it as a kind of network. So what network do I want to be in? Because if you just put yourself more into that network, then it will influence you. You'll start thinking and seeing things the way they are. And I think that's it's a subtle but interesting thing. It's very much like every parent wants your kids to hang out with the right crowd, right?
Yeah.
Because they know how much you're influenced by peers. But you can decide who those peers are going to be. And the first step might be like, let's say I'm really interested in, I don't know, alternate energy investments. So maybe my first step is I'm just going to listen to podcasts about that. And then maybe I'll go to a meeting that they have, a meetup type thing. And then maybe I'll start looking at programs, right? But I'm going to just see myself as part of this network and go deeper. And it really has a huge impact on your own goal setting.
Yep. Well, let me jump in, because 2 things. One is, from personal experience, one of the best things that's ever happened to me is becoming a part of a small little mastermind of business owners, people that are content creators, that are authors, speakers, whatever, but they're also typically doing something else. And they become some of my best friends. It's about a dozen people. And I was invited into that group, thank goodness, but you can create your own. And so when I think about our audience, obviously one of the topics that's most important to them, because they're listening to this show, is how do I grow a book of business? How do I grow my relationships? How do I grow my career? Things like that. Well, folks, if you want to really grab onto Michael's advice here, form a group of people that are roughly, within a year or 2 or 2 or 3 years of your experience in those things, and meet periodically and share success, cheer each other on. Like, I love that social contagion idea. I've always boxed myself into mastermind, but you can make these groups big, you can make them small, but the key is surround yourself with people who want to accomplish the same thing, and good things happen. Michael, is that? Yep.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you can have multiple identities. So there could be the part of you that does that, and then be part of you, volunteers at your church or temple, and part of you really loves the show Succession and just wants to talk about that all the time. Like, so you're not stuck in one thing. And I think that is a really important part. Like, let's say someone who regards himself as quite shy or not that business-like thinks, I want to get good at business development because I'm a consultant or lawyer and I know that I'm going to have to do it one day. And I don't know, those people seem so peppy and assertive, and that's not me. You could listen, for example, your podcast, and they might connect with 90% of it. They might connect with 20% of it, but that's how you get started, right? And you start seeing how you can develop it yourself. All right. So that's all about networks. And then I also then wanted to demystify, well, what really are relationships? Like, how do they work, and how do you develop them? So the first idea is that relationships are connections with reciprocal beneficial exchange. over time. Okay. So I share something with you, you share something with me. I help you, you help me, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll give you an example. So I'm a single dad. I'm a gay dad with twin sons, and my kids go to this small Catholic school in New York. And for various reasons, I found it a little bit hard to connect in with parents. But at this new school, it's sort of easier. And I met this Korean mom. Our kids go to the same Taekwondo studio. And then I want to explain a process called bids, right? So a bid is an initiative to take the relationship further. So one day I got a text from her. She said, "Hey, Michael, my son, I'm having a tough time picking up David today because of work stuff. Are you going to drop off? Would you be able to pick him up and just take him to the playground with your kids for an hour?" And I was free that day. I'm like, sure. Because in a way, I saw this as an opportunity to connect, right? So then did that. It was fine. She was like super grateful. But each of us knew that we're kind of taking our relationship one step up, right? She asked a favor and then I was happy to do it. Then later, I was wondering about like summer camp stuff for kids. I was a little bit not behind the ball. And she's like, "Well, there's this chess camp and here's a person you ask for a discount." So I reached out to them and I found this person and I got the discount and signed my kids up for 4 weeks. So that was very helpful. Then she was asking once about a reading tutor. I'm like, "Well, I found this tutor who's in Manila who went to NYU and do evenings and she's fantastic," and gave her that number, right? And then later she said like, "Oh, my husband doesn't even know how to fold up the stroller yet." I'm like, "I'll tell you what you do. You leave him alone with the kids for 48 hours and he'll figure out how to fold up that stroller." So we were just kind of going back and forth, but each of these is like a bid and a counter bid and a response, another bid. And that's really how relationships develop, right? And in a way, we have something in common, like our kids in the same school, but I wouldn't say we have huge amounts in common, but we're able to still create this relationship. So there is this kind of reciprocity. I do want to make the point that reciprocity is not always, it's usually not exact, right? So if, let's say you're a younger person and you talk to a much more senior person for career advice, okay, you might want to help that senior person, you might want to give back, but you may have very little to offer. What you can offer is appreciation. You can take notes when he or she is speaking. You can follow up.
You say, "Worked.
It totally worked. Thank you again." Or I was just reflecting on that. That is still something you're offering, right? And so people get too wrapped up in, "Oh, I need to offer this person something exactly equivalent." Well, it's probably not going to happen. Like you may not be in a position to do anything. And it's a little bit ridiculous to think you would, but over time, you can still have this kind of exchange.
Yep. And Michael, let me jump in with 2 points because I want to land this for the audience. A lot of times our high-end experts, I mean, you know them well as a lawyer and being in law firms, that could be a consultant or whoever, or even account manager at a big services-based company, like a big healthcare company or something. A lot of times people get hung up because they feel like, well, I must serve the client. This is a one-way street. And folks, I want to hit you over the head with this. That is just not the fastest way to deepen a relationship. Great relationships are mutually beneficial. And so I'd like you to go a little touch deeper on this idea, Michael, within the context of our audience. I can't remember if this is the part of the book or somewhere else, but where you talk about little increments of improvement, or bids might be 15% more than what you've done before. We're not talking about asking for some big life-changing 2-day go to a cabin on a weekend and ask a client for advice, but like little small movements in the direction of making things mutually beneficial or more mutually beneficial. Michael, can you just comment on that?
Sure. This is an idea called taking 15% risks. And I got it from a book by a well-known guy named David Bradford. The idea is that you want to stretch a bit. You want to be a bit more personal, a bit more direct, a bit more vulnerable, whatever it is, as opposed to taking the safest route. And 15% is a nice number because the idea is that you're doing something a bit different from what you would normally do. You don't quite know if it's going to work, but if it doesn't work, you're not completely devastated. Like, all right, well, didn't really respond or didn't, seem to get to that idea, but often they will, right? And that's how you really start getting to know. So a good example might be you're meeting with a client. They're important. You really want them to like you. You thinking about it, you do a good job, and you see a picture on their desk of some kids. 15% risk is, oh, are those your kids? How old are they? What are their names? Where do they go to school? Because you're in a way taking a risk to be personal because they might want to disclose, they might not. There is a photo there, so they're not hiding, But you're also
Yep.
taking this risk because instead of trying to show myself as like a really great vendor of services, I'm actually going to be willing to take 5 minutes of this person's important time and go personal, right? That's a
Yep.
risk, but it could also
Yep.
really pay off because,
Yep.
to some degree, clients make decisions on the basis of emotion and trust and how they feel about you, right? And
Of
so
course. Yeah.
so many relationships are just transactional. Like they're just so focused on the business, or I just contact you when I need a thing. So it's a good example to think about how could I just push a little bit here, right?
And I want to push the audience a little bit more by asking you a question.
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of our clients worry about going personal with their clients. I do great work. I'm the technical expert. I don't know them well enough. Audio listeners, I'm waving my hands. I don't know them well enough to go personal. But I loved your idea of 15% because you can just barely go personal. Or you can even ask an open-ended question. Hey, what are you excited about? Well, the person might talk about work. Maybe they'll talk about a holiday they've
Mm-hmm.
got coming up or a vacation. Well, now they've invited you in to talk about that. So, Micheal, just talk a little bit more about why it's important to blend business and personal. Because I see so many people struggle with this. I really want to pin this down.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, we're human beings and they're human beings and they are having a human experience with you. Now you can keep that in a tiny little box or you can try to open it up more. We spend more time at work than doing anything else, right? So if we can be real people as opposed to these kind of shiny robots, that's probably better. People have all kinds of stuff going on in their lives and they may want to share for the right person. They could be sharing their excitements, they could be sharing their uncertainties. They might even be sharing like bad feelings or sadness or this or that. I
Yep.
mean, you develop this over time, but the difference between talking to someone who you know is competent versus talking to someone I know they're competent and I really like them and I like how I feel around them. I like
Yeah.
I like how life feels in the times that we're together. I think that's a
Mhm.
much richer relationship. I mean, I just feel like we know, like when we're feeling kind of boxed up and tight, and it's like a tie that's too tight and shoes that don't quite fit, and we think we're supposed to dress this way, but on some level we know that this is not really being human, right? And so the more we can put them together, the better. And I think the other thing I would say is that let's use an analogy.
And I just
Go ahead.
I hate to stop you because you're in a role, but I just have to say this to the
I have
audience.
a lot of roles.
How you just said that is more elegant than I've ever heard it. I like how life feels when I'm around them. And yes, audience members, you're getting hired to settle that case or do that arbitration. You're getting hired to do that cost takeout by your big client. You're getting hired to add that new ancillary service onto the services they already buy. But if you can add to that technical expertise the feeling of them feeling, I like how life feels when I'm around you, audience member, that completely differentiates you. And I think both of these, the professional and the personal, the hireable and the human, they're both so darn important that if you only box yourself in to do great work, you're still a commodity to a large extent.
Mhm.
Not always, but scary so. But if you can add to this person where they just want to be around you more, they're lifted up. This is really important in taking that 15% risk to just put your toe a little bit into an element of personal. A lot of clients are going to engage with that, especially if they're passionate about it. And then this just unlocks a whole new level of the relationship.
I'm all goosebumpy as you as you talk, and I want to jump on something you said that's a little bit
Do
different
it.
from where we were before. So let's say you're a kind of problem solver. You might be a consultant. You might be an attorney. You might be doing some type of complex financial stuff. So yes, you are providing a solution for your client, and the client wants their problem solved. That's their need. But let's look more broadly. Let's say you have a client who is facing an SEC investigation. Okay, what are they really benefiting from? They're benefiting from feeling that maybe things will be okay, or maybe I'm in
Yeah.
the best hands, or maybe things are going to feel really crappy for a while, but we're
Yep.
doing the right things, and I can rely on you, and I can sleep a little bit better. I don't have to figure out everything. I can feel supported by somebody else. I can be open about, like, I'm 55 years old and I didn't expect this to happen in my life, and how do I deal with my family and my ability to provide for them,
Yeah.
right? And so you may perceive that it's your technical skills that are the most important, but those technical skills are also affecting people on multiple human ways, right?
Yeah.
And so the more you allow them to express that and feel that, the better they're going to feel about the service that you're doing, and the more they're going to feel lifted up, right? And lifted up isn't necessarily you're awesome and you're the handsomest guy I've ever seen and you're going to be worth $10 million. It could just be, wow, I feel a little bit more in control of my life right now, right? I feel
Yeah.
more able to deal with some of the scary challenges in front of me. That's also
Yeah.
lifting up.
Yeah, feeling understood. If you saying, "Gosh, that sucks that you went through that today." You're just feeling understood, letting somebody get something off their chest. Okay, I'd like to steer us,
Mhm.
Michael. I hope it's okay, but I feel like if we pair this idea of covering things people can remember forever, I feel like we've pinned that down.
Yeah.
But practical things people can put in practice, like right when they're done with this episode. I wonder if you can steer me. But I'm thinking of going to where you talk about the right relationship portfolio, potentially tracking some things
Yeah.
like that. Where if we go practical, where would you say we should start?
Let's talk about that. And let's look at the bigger issue, which is that, okay, I know a lot of people. I may or may not have a lot of strong ties, but you definitely have a lot of weak ties. And
Yep.
I'm supposed to work on these relationships, when and who and in what order and how do I find the time and all that kind of stuff, right? So the idea is let's just create a method for over time attending to these relationships in meaningful ways. And we want a good enough system. We don't want a perfect system. We just want a good enough system. Because at the end, what I want you to have is a habit of relationship building and relationship maintenance that you can fit
Yep.
into your life. And I use the phrase 20 minutes a day, just something you do steady Eddie, small steps pay off, tortoise wins the race, right?
Yep.
So number one concept there is a relationship portfolio. So you have a financial portfolio. It's a balanced set of assets. It reflects your appetite for risk, your cash needs. They're hedged against one another. You don't you don't go all in on Coinbase thinking that's really going to work out for you, right? You want a bit of a balance. Same thing with relationships. So
Yep.
there are 7 categories I have. These are weak ties, bosses and senior stakeholders, sponsors and mentors, clients, colleagues, friends, and beneficiaries. And most of these are fairly straightforward. And then there are numerous exercises to kind of generate, all right, well, who are these for me? And maybe you don't have all of them. Maybe you're not so strong on the sponsor mentors, but it's something you want to work on. Or what's this beneficiaries idea? I don't have time for that. It's all explained. And then each month, you kind of take a look at these 7 categories and think about, all right, who would I like to focus on for this month? And I would say ideally, every category is represented, but in particular, weak ties, you want to reach out to a handful or more of those. And so I have this concept called the relationship bingo card, relationship portfolio bingo card, where you have an Excel spreadsheet with 16 cells, and you just pop up what the label is. So weak tie 1, weak tie 2, weak tie 3, sponsor 1, sponsor 2, etc. And then you just decide this month, who am I going to aim at, right? And again, you're not getting the perfect list. You're not getting the most analytically coherent list. You're just coming up with a number of people where there will be benefit to reach out to. And you kind of refresh this each month. And so that's the idea is you want to think of some people to reach out with. And then the second thing is we want a variety.
And let me jump in because I want to reconcile something for our group. So whether you've gone through Grow Big Training Audience, Module 8, taught about how to create a relationship advantage. If you've read the Snowball System, Chapter 4 is obviously about relationships. A lot where we sort of start, Michael, because we cover a lot more content than just networking and relationships, we have to keep it short. It's like our section of this is a chapter, yours is a whole book. I've made it really purposeful about saying, hey, focus on your top 8 or 10 relationships. We call that a protomoy list. It's a Greek word. It means first among equals. And come heck or high water, you want to invest in those folks first. I mean, heck, buy a dry erase board and stick those names on a wall in front of you, so you see them every day. But for the audience, I think what's interesting of what you've done is you've done a more robust version of that. You've taken it you've leveled it up sometimes people that get the protomoy list down, I highly recommend the system that Micheal that describes here, where you broaden the list of the people you're staying in touch with.
Mm-hmm.
You, for your weak ties folks, maybe you're rotating the round where you keep in touch once a year or twice a year. So you spread it out. So your method can scale up to 100, 200 or whatever people, whereas we really had to keep it really simple. So folks, if you feel like you've nailed down the prototype list, crack open Micheal's book. All this concept starts around page 66. And it's really good. And I love the idea of the bingo card. So, Micheal, I just want to do that to reconcile with our folks.
I appreciate that.
But keep rolling.
Well, let me add 2 thoughts there. So I like your list, and I of course love putting on a dry erase board or a Post-it, because once you name it, you start seeing it. It's like if you buy a new car, you suddenly see that car everywhere. Like, oh, I didn't know there were so many CRVs. There are a lot of CRVs. Trust me, just buy one.
Yeah.
Or Odysseys. Honda Odyssey. Everyone has a Honda Odyssey. So that's super effective because the naming of it in a way inspires the creativity. So day one, how will I meet these 12 people? Well, by 2 months in, you're going to start having ideas.
Exactly.
2 other things. I'm talking about sustainability, both in terms of your efforts and also keeping this sort of flow, right? So those are the 10, 12 relationships for now, but in 3 years, it might be different. Well, how will you know what they are? Well, that's how the weak ties sort of work in. Like if you keep them flowing in, you'll probably be able to identify them. Second thing is, let's think about you as a human being. So one of the categories is friends. Now you might think, oh, everyone hangs out with their friends. Okay, I, Micheal Melcher, I'm a very extroverted, loving person. I value my relationship. I often don't make the time to hang out with friends because work comes first and got to take their kids. And I suffer from it because I love being with my close friends. You know, I love finding time for them. And I got to tell you, you know, New York, you got to schedule that stuff. People are not spontaneous about it. You need to be on the books 2 months ahead of time. Second thing, beneficiaries. So I believe every single person listening should be a benefactor. A benefactor is someone who spreads their largesse to the world. You do that through relationships, through connecting people, and through sharing information. You can be 18 years old or 88 years old, and you still have this ability to do it. And when you think about who are my beneficiaries, who am I just deciding I would like to help, even if they haven't asked me, you're doing a good thing, but it also then changes the whole energy of your networking, right? Because networking can feel so me all the time. Like I'm trying to accomplish something, I'm my goals, whatever. And people can get a little blocked from that. Like I don't want to be a narcissist or selfish or whatever, right? If you define yourself as someone, oh, well, part of my whole thing is I help other people and I'm always looking out for opportunities to connect them. It then frees you to ask when you need to ask, because you're like, this is not my totality of being. Like I do both. I give and I receive. I help and I receive help. So it's a bit more, I think, long-term sustainable if we kind of add these different categories to the list you already have.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right, here's where I want to go next. I want to continue on the practicality note. And I loved how you talked about introducing a little vulnerability. Can you riff on that a little bit and to think about the audiences, again, back to these high-end experts, our watchers, our listeners. It can be really difficult for them to get out of the box of, I am the expert, I must always be perfect, I cannot show any vulnerability. And that is a limiter to relationships.
It's a huge limiter.
Yeah. So think about, I mean, obviously you've been around law firms, been a lawyer, all those things, but how can a high-end expert in particular introduce a little vulnerability, but still retain their credibility?
Yeah. Well, I think 2 different ways. First, being an expert, what is the value there? Well, it's helping a person get to the right solution. Now, do you know that solution 2 minutes after you walk in the door? Or do you know that solution by having a really deep back and forth conversation with them for 5-6 hours where they really explore what's going on? The second one is clearly more powerful, right? Because if you're, lawyers who are charging $1,200 an hour should not be giving generic advice. No one's going to pay for that, right? It's got to be something more valuable. It's based on the totality of your judgment. And to apply that, you actually have to listen. So I think one point of vulnerability is, can you just not be the freaking expert for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes? Can you let your expertise take the form of being a good listener and just asking, tell me more about that. What was the result? What else have you tried? What else is going on here? And resist the urge to say, and that's why I'm the expert for you, right? So that requires a little bit of vulnerability, because it's like, well, if I'm not offering my expertise day one, will they in the first moment, will they really respect me? They probably will, but you're going to have to try it. The second thing is being vulnerable as a person. And we know when people are being authentic. Like if you are having an authentic experience with somebody, you just remember, you might not even know why it's happening, but somehow the plastic has come off, right? Somehow it's not all shiny, right? You're talking about a real person. And I think that the best way to define vulnerability is you are showing yourself to be a full human. So a full human has things they're in the middle of, things I haven't figured out yet, uncertainties I have, anxieties or fears, or things I wonder about, right? Things I'm curious about. Like I'm not
Yeah.
all packaged up, right? And when you are able to show vulnerability, you're actually inviting the other person to do the same, right? So I earlier made a reference to like, I'm a gay dad. I have identical twin sons. I mean, it's 2023. Is that such a extreme statement to make? No, not at all. It's pretty mainstream, but it's not a statement everybody would make in my position, right? Some people, oh,
Yep.
well, who am I supposed to be here on this podcast? How can I make sure that everyone likes me? Well, I would say that I think people relate to me being a real person. They're like, oh, maybe I could
Oh,
talk about
100%.
my kid's hard time in school, and that might be something people share, or what
Well,
have you, right?
yeah, and you would never know this, but I knew I wanted to have you on your show, on this show, when I read your website, because you say that on the website,
Yeah,
and they're younger, and it's up to them to talk about it. But I can just say I have very, very close family members that are gay. So
yeah,
when I saw yours, I'm like, all right, that's awesome. Michael did that. The people I know would just like clap, and I got goosebumps saying like you took the risk to put that out there, and I just think it's awesome. So
right.
it's bonding. Yeah.
And we're able to share that now, right? Because it came up, and now we're more connected in a more human way.
Yes. Yeah. I
Um,
felt connected with you instantly. And I thought, yeah.
Right. And
So
so,
if I,
I do want to say though that vulnerability it's not easy, right? Because I do not believe that you can just lay everything out in the workplace. Like workplaces are somewhat artificial environments. Like we are there to get a
yep.
job done. We're not there to just
Yep.
like let down our hair on everything. And you don't always quite know how it's going to be. I
Yep.
think a nice, easy way to start is to just think about something I'm trying to figure out something I'm trying to figure out, or a decision that I'm kind of in the middle of right now, or something I'm not really certain about. Okay, that can go in a lot of different directions. I'm not certain about where I'm going on my fishing trip this summer, or I'm not certain about whether my kid is really going to be happy in college or should try some other path, right? Or I'm not certain about
Yeah.
what my business numbers are going to look like this year. Like you can take it wherever you want, but it opens up the humanity, and it gives an opening for the other person. And again, they might take it, they might not, but you've
Yep.
made that bid.
Yeah. I love it. And I think we can apply our 15% idea to this too. And as I was thinking about it, I even took a note off to the side. I haven't thought about these two words, love the rhyming. You can be vulnerable and be credible. And I think the
That
line
is
you don't want to
good.
cross. Yeah. Oh, I'm writing the manuscript for our next book right now. It's in there somewhere. This is this little sidebar that gets taken and put in notes other places. But yeah, so audience members, and Michael, get your take on this. Is I think a lot of times people think they can't be vulnerable because it'll mess up their credibility, and that does not have to be the case. In the work world, I loved your example. Something you're figuring out, a decision you're making, things like that. It might be something like, yeah, I'm speaking at a conference next month, and I'm just 100% sure the content is pinned down, but I've never spoken to a group quite this big
Mhm.
and a little worried about it. So I'm going to rehearse a little bit more, but I got to tell you, I'm used to 100-person groups, but not 1,000-person groups. I'm making this up, but that might be a work thing. On the personal side, it's even easier, just sharing you're worried about your daughter going to college, or it's going to be tough not transitioning to an empty nest, or gosh, my wife had cancer, then COVID,
Mm.
then pneumonia for the last 14 months nonstop. Sharing that with clients helped me process it. And I think they really appreciated the fact that we were going through some tough
Well,
times. Like,
well,
anyway, go, just riff.
let me pick up on that too, because this is sort of an eternal truth about being open and sharing some vulnerability as a way to connect. And it's very specific to this time in history, right? So we've just gone through this 3-year crazy period. We're not finished. And people had very different experiences. And so I feel like we're kind of moving from a black and white to in color again. Like we've had this very grayscale sort of world.
Yep.
And there's a lot of walking wounded, and we just don't know what other people's experiences are. Like we're kind of acting as if we're back to normal, and some people are, some people are not, right? And so I do think that and the other thing that happened during COVID is I do think people became more human, more honest. And just a funny example everyone's seen, you're on a call, and all of a sudden some little kid comes running through, behind, or starts yelling something. And it's like very charming. Like, oh, we all have families, we all have kids or dogs or whatever. Like we're not just these carefully blurred backgrounds, right?
Right.
So
right. No, I love it. And I was just reflecting as you were talking, like this idea of venturing into the vulnerability personally or professionally. Again, only 15% risk, so it's not that big of a risk. Is I was reflecting on some of the times when I've gotten the most value out of a relationship was when I shared something. Didn't expect anything in response, but I just thought back to what right after my dad had a stroke a couple years ago, and I was sharing that with a client. He's like, "Well, you don't know this, but I had a stroke."
Oh my goodness!
And, yeah, and he's in his 40s or maybe younger 50s, but anyway, we had a separate call where he shared the steps that he had to go through to get out of it, and I learned about books, podcasts, doctors, resources, all this stuff that I was able to process and sift through and give to my dad. And it made an impact on our family. Well, I wouldn't have gotten that gift from Tim had I not just shared, hey, I'm a little off today just because I'm reeling with some news from last week. And go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful example. And it also illustrates this idea called minute 32 in my book, which is that
Talk about that. I loved it.
You can't predict where any one conversation will go because a conversation is chemistry in action. So I come with my ideas, my thoughts, my agenda. You come with your feelings, thoughts, agenda, and then the conversation is a result. And so it might not take off. It might be 1 + 1 = 2, but it could be 1 + 1 = 7 or 23, right? And there would be no way that you could have predicted that response, right? And that's a very personal story, but there are also business applications too. Like, oh, I didn't know that you were interested in that area, or let me call this person or check out this article. And it doesn't happen in every conversation, but that's why we want to be able to be in it and just see what happens and not pre-qualify everything. Like I think one error people make is that they try to pre-qualify. They try to think who's going to be most useful. Like what is going to be the best way to approach? And you want to be sensible, like you want to have priorities, but you cannot predict who's going to be useful to you, and you cannot predict how any conversation will go, period.
Yes. So I think it's the perfect time to talk about, you had a 3-number ratio that added up to 100, like 30, 50, 20 or something like that. I think that would be really helpful to talk to the audience right now. So when they think about outreach, again, our audience has been getting A+ their whole life. Everybody on this audience is 99th percentile because you're listening and watching this podcast. So you're
obviously
really good, audience.
Hello, right?
You're the smartest, best looking.
You're not wrong. I mean,
exactly. But on a serious note, everybody expects perfection. Like when they shoot a check-in note to a client, they expect that in 3 minutes, somebody's going to reply back, say, it's the best thing they ever read. Thank you. You changed my life. And if you've got that expectation, you hesitate and you never send the darn note. Yeah. And you had a great ratio. So share that with the audience.
Okay. So there are two ratios I'm going to share. The first one relates to the result of a conversation. And it's 3-5-2 or 30-50-20. So in 10 conversations, I would predict that 3 of them will be much better than you expect. Oh, that went well, or I didn't expect to learn that, or that was cool, or that was fun. 5 of them will be like, okay, I'm doing the work, professional, showing up, not anything, wow, a little meh, maybe, but this is how we do stuff over time. And 2 of them will be like a date. You're looking at the menu thinking, do I really have to order anything? Can I just, is a glass of water enough? Can I get out of it? You just know it's not going to happen, right? Or it's so painful or dull. And the difference is that you'll still have those 2, but you can now just say, cool, check that one off the list. Maybe the next one will be one of the great ones, right? So it's a bit of a volume play. in the sense that you can't predict how anyone will go. And so we want to make this habit of connecting and having conversations going forward. And then the other ratio I would use is 3-to-1. So I tell people when they're reaching out, they should expect to have 3 reach outs for each 1 response they get. Now, in reality, it's better than that. It's more like 2-to-1 or possibly even a little lower than that. It will not be 1-to-1. It will not be 1-to-1. So you need to just get over that desire that everything you do will be responded to. And the reason is that people are busy and you want something's important to you, but for them, it's one of the many things in their day. And you cannot know what is actually happening in their life either, right? And we were just talking about these important personal things. Something like that might be going on in somebody's life. And guess what? If your house is on fire, you don't write thank you notes. If you got really tough stuff going on, you may not be responding to a potentially great vendor within a day or even a week. And so a non-response is not a no. A non-response is not a no. You just have to get over that.
Yes.
And remove your ego, because the world is, like, I'm a nice guy. I think I have stuff to offer, but the world is not revolving around me most of the time, right? And so I'm going to reach out, and some of them will respond, and some I actually have to follow up on. Again, multiple times.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so important, audience, to get ourselves out of the way. All right, 3 or 4 rapid fire questions here at the end. And these are fun. These are about you, Micheal. I mean, you've accomplished a great thing.
One of my favorite subjects.
Yeah. Maybe the never one.
I mean,
why not? You've written an awesome book. How do you, what's neat is it pulls together so many different things. How do you keep learning personally?
I do a lot of journaling and kind of self-coaching exercises. So I just came off a very intense period of change on multiple fronts, and, it was good, and kind of launched a book and started a new firm. And I thought I need to have a chill summer. I need to relax. I need to kind of enjoy what I've gotten. And I realized I actually need to write that out. So it's like, well, what would this relaxed, fun summer look like for me? Like, what do I know about myself? What activities do I like historically? What will build me up? What will kind of weaken me? And I just kind of write it down. I enjoy doing those sorts of journaling activities. So that's one thing I do.
Yeah, and in fact, just found I do the same. I have a weekly and a quarterly and an annual habit. And it's there's something about writing things down that just manifests it into reality. So the fact that you wrote down what your summer is going to look like, you may flex a little bit off of that original plan, but I'll bet 80% of that stuff's going to happen now just because you thought it out and wrote it down. It wasn't just walking around thinking, you have to write it down.
Because you're sorting out the clutter as you write, right?
Yes.
You're sorting out the clutter.
I love that. Okay, next up. And I think this is interesting. I'd love you to keep this in the domain of sort of relationships and networks. What are the lies that you hear people tell themselves that get in their own success, that get in the way of their own success?
I don't have any power, so I can't possibly reach out to people or have a good network. And that's become more common, I would say. And it's simply false. Every society in the world has ways of building relationship. Every human being has multiple dimensions through which you can connect, and you cannot really predict how it's going to go anyway. So, and everybody has something to offer. And the thing is, with any sort of limiting belief, like any negative belief about relationship building and networking, okay, there can be truth to it. Like, oh, people will think I'm weird, possibly. But I would always ask, what does holding that belief allow you to do? Now, if it allows you to do nothing and to almost be smug about doing nothing, then I think it's worthy of being questioned. Because it's a nice, if it's negative enough, you're kind of tapping yourself on the back, patting yourself on the back for not doing anything. And that's probably not a great thing to do.
I love that question. How did you say that? What does holding this belief allow me to do?
Yeah. What does it allow me to do? It's like, how am I benefiting from this kind of negative belief? Well, I get to just stay home and watch Netflix tonight, for one.
Yeah.
I don't have to go to that event.
Yeah.
Because it might be weird, right?
Yeah. But over 10 years, not going to be good. But that decision done multiple times. All right, next up, how do you personally keep going, including the setbacks that we all have?
Well, I think I know what my core values are. All coaches do some type of values thing. Most people probably do. I sometimes forget them, but one of my core values is just my kids. I mean, being a father has been the best thing that ever happened to me. And so when I'm really bugged by something or hasn't gone my way, okay, well, what's really important to me and how does this add up? And then what's in my ability to be a great and loving father today, right? And there's always something I can do. So that's kind of a way I keep myself grounded.
I love that. What's interesting about that is it prompts you to action, positive action too. What's in my ability to do those things today? Okay, last one. Audience is excited. It's time for the super powerful inspirational
I'm a little scared
nudge.
by this. I
know.
like the visual aid here. Oh my God, it even makes a little clicky sound.
I know. I put it up by the mic so you could get extra bonus click. Okay, how do you, Michael, hold yourself accountable?
Well, I have a spreadsheet that I've kept for the last 12 years where I track all my current and anticipated revenue. And interestingly, I did not do this for the first 8 years of my coaching career, so I'm not sure what I was doing. And I'm not that financy, I would say, but I do take a certain pleasure in actually getting into the details here.
Yep.
Like anything related to money and net worth and so forth, I think in a very macro way, but I don't always do the work. But I find it kind of pleasurable to like fill in the cells and wait, the formatting's not good on that, and let me fix it. Yeah. And so I'll periodically just return to that and then look at how the numbers are and what the business flow is as a way to just, what is the data and where am I? And therefore, is it going well? Do I make course corrections? Should I feel good about it? Whatever.
Yep. Well, I love that. It's so many, I just have to share this. Like so many people shy away from talking about money, but it's not the only thing by any means, but it's one measure of the impact you're having. The more money that's coming in, that's indicative that you're impacting more people in a deeper way. By the way, I think it's super cool that a person that's a relationship expert brought that up as the accountability. I think that's really neat. No, I think it's a neat balance. I really do.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So people are going to want to dig into your content. I know you do coaching, the book, obviously, product placement, everybody, Your Invisible Network, Micheal Melcher. Where should people go to reach out to you, to connect, to learn more?
All right. Well, I'm going to give you all an assignment that will accomplish all of this. So go to my company website, which is michealmelcher.com /resources. And under the resource page, there are a few downloads. One of them is this kind of visual article I wrote about the 7 types of relationships you need. I want you to go in and download it. And then I want you to write to 3 of your weak ties as a ping. Ping is a email that doesn't require a response. Say, hey, so-and-so, hope you're doing well. I read this cool article. I liked it. Check it out. Yours, Mo, or whatever you want to do. But use that as something you can send along to other people, but to 3 weak ties that you maybe have not connected with for some time. That's what you can do.
I think it's brilliant. And how cool is it? Like that this is some of the same things that we teach, but we don't usually talk a lot about weak ties. It's in module 8, everybody, if you've gone through Grow Big training. But I think you've got some exact scripts. It's in what's neat about that download, it's going to cover the other 6 types of relationships, which I think is really cool. Again, if you like the Proto-Minimalist folks, and tens of thousands of people use it that have gone through our training and a lot more that have read the Snowball System, this takes things to the next level, which I think is really neat. So if you're ready for the next level on your relationships, Your Invisible Network, Micheal Melcher, and then you can get it at Amazon, everywhere books are sold. And then also I think that's a great to do. So Micheal Melcher, MELCHER.com /resources. Yeah. Then you're looking for the 7 types of relationships, everybody. Download that, 3 weak ties, something good's going to happen.
All right. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you
Michael,
for making me your next level.
You're taking things to the next level.
And you are a very well-prepared interviewer, I must say. So you definitely get an A today.
I'm telling you. Well, I've been on the other side of this. When we launched the Snowball System, even today, we're on podcast all the time. And most people don't know a thing about the books. Like, hey, tell me about what's in Snowball System. And I was like, okay, it's the same old, same old. But what I want to do for audience, little sneak peek here is, it's one thing to have a great expert come on the show like Micheal. It's another thing for me to help apply it directly to your world, which is really different than if Micheal you were talking to some recent college grads or some people that were in transition. Like, I love the application. I think that's a lot of times what people say they like about the show. So thanks for being on the show.
right.
This was awesome. A+, 99.9th percentile. You're still
Well,
winning.
that's what I've been
It's all
waiting
good.
for. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mo. I've had a really nice
All right.
time. Okay. Bye.
See you, Michael.